Dwane Casey is no longer the head coach of the Toronto Raptors. After a year in which he was celebrated for changing the culture, for adjusting the style of play that they have, for building this bench rotation, number 1 seed. They won more games than any other team in their entire conference. And now he's no longer the head coach of the team. We just found out this news. What is your first reaction?
Somewhere Mike Brown is crying a thug tear. He has been there. He knows. And sometimes you overachieve so much that it becomes a negative. Like you're too good for your own good. And so even though what he did with Toronto, it was a remarkable job. But he's doing it in the conference that has been basically owned by
The
LeBron James.
LeBron Prince. We'll call it the LeBron Prince.
Pretty much. LeBron Prince, right?
Yeah, let's do this.
That's just the way it rolls. And sometimes the player of that generation, ask all the people who had to face Michael Jordan and didn't get a championship out of that, they felt like clearly that as far as he had gotten them, kind of like the Tony Dungy when they replaced him with John Gruden, that they had reached their ceiling with him.
There's a couple things that are remarkable about this. Number one for me is after they got swept by the Cavs for what felt like the 16th year in a row, you say, oh, we need to make some changes. And you look up and down their roster, and they've got an unmovable Kyle Lowry contract. They've got DeMar DeRozan, who's their best player. You're not going to move him. The other people are kind of locked in or super young. No one wants Serge Ibaka's contract. You can't. It's so easy for people that don't do the research to be like, blow up the team. Right. And you're like, well, what exactly does that mean? And how do you make a trade for who?
Yeah.
And really, what this ends up being is we need to make a change. We can't change the roster, so we're going to fire the head coach.
So do you think if it would have been a closer series that they do this?
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I'll answer your question. I'm not Jalen Rose. I actually will answer the question. But here's what happened is his latest quote was interesting. He was like, this year's sweep was different than last year's sweep. And he kind of pointed, he just said this like yesterday or today. He pointed to the 2 games that were buzzer beaters from LeBron. And he's basically saying is, yes, we were swept 2 years in a row. On a macro holistic sense, that looks terrible. However, if you look into the way that we were swept this year, it's different than last year. That was basically his way of saying, please don't fire me. Please don't fire me. You saw what happened, right? With number 1 seed. And it was LeBron made a couple crazy shots like, please don't fire me.
Well, but I don't know if you got this sense, but I certainly did, especially after, it was really, after game 1, it felt like the series was over. And in the playoffs, that usually doesn't happen because you know that the storyline, things change from game to game. But with this team in particular, there just seems to be a lack of belief. I saw that last year, and I saw it this year, even though, again, last year was a little bit different. They just don't, it just feels like there's something with this team and the Cavs. They don't actually feel like they can beat LeBron.
So I love that you bring this up, too, because there was this narrative the entire series. And I remember game 1, the overtime game, it was like they should have won that game. Game 2, remember, they played great the first half. They were shooting like 60% from the floor. They're up by 2. They end up losing that one. And then people start saying, well, LeBron has their numbers. And people start talking about this mumbo-jumbo, psychoanalyst stuff, like, oh, they can't get over the LeBron hump, and they see LeBron in that jersey, and and I don't really believe in that stuff. However, in this case, I kind of believe in that stuff. Like, if you were to say, why did they lose? I'd be like, well, Valanciunas, they kind of exploited him, and it was kind of messy, and Siakam and Anabuie, they can't cover LeBron, and those are the real reasons. But I do think that there is actually some actual factual, there is a psychological hurdle that they could not get over against LeBron James.
And there are teams that did not achieve nearly as much as Toronto that don't seem to have that issue, like the Wizards.
The Pacers.
Yeah. So here you're the team, it's on a platter for you. You have the number 1 seed. You have home court. This is one of LeBron's weaker teams in the last 4 or 5 years. The Cavs, they had 7 seasons in 1 season. They totally blew their entire team up at the trade deadline, and you have them in a vulnerable moment with a supporting cast that had not done much all throughout the season, and you still can't beat them.
It's crazy. Can I go? We just got this information, but I'm just going to even go a little bit further with a theory. Remember Fizdale when he left Memphis? Everyone sort of agrees Fizdale's a great coach. He was a very hot ticket. Everyone wanted him to be their head coach. Around the league, people respect him. I think that like as media, we try to pretend that we know who's a good coach and who's not. But I like to take the opinions of the people that actually know. Fizdale left because it seemed like him and Marc Gasol couldn't get along eye to eye. Let's talk about DeRozan and Casey. Remember, he didn't play in Game 3 at the end, and he got flagrant fouled out. He shouldn't have been kicked out of that game, but he flagrant fouled his way out of Game 4, and perhaps there's an exit interview thing. Perhaps this is like a him or me sort of thing, or if you're the front office, you're saying, look, we're definitely going to have DeRozan here next year, and if DeRozan and Casey aren't working, perhaps we need to replace Casey.
Did you think that what happened with him benching him, that was something they could have never gotten over? Because sometimes, like with Fizdale and Gasol, that seemed to be a strained relationship that had lingered, right? That it wasn't just about one or two things or one incident, that seemed to be problematic. This just seemed to be about this particular game and series. I mean, unless it was something I was missing, I had not heard of them having that kind of strained relationship.
I agree, and I also feel like they could have gotten over that personally, and also I feel that way because do you know what helps mend relationships? W's. You know what I mean? So in Memphis, not a lot of W's, not a lot of good post-game feelings, not a lot of fun flights. But if you're the Raptors, you know, I believe they have a good nucleus. They will win a lot of games next year with or without Dwane Casey. So I do kind of feel like, yes, that would have been mended over time.
But see, then now Toronto set itself up for the 80-20 rule, right? So if they don't get someone who is able to produce similar results.
Well, we know who the next head coach is going to be. I'll break the news right now. Aubrey Drake Graham. He's already sitting right there. He's heard everything that they strategized about. He gets the stat sheet. Blockboy told us that. Like, it's definitely going to be Drake as the next head coach of the Toronto Raptors. Breaking that news right here on Jalen Jacoby.